Hello and welcome once again to the Nexus. Today's show, Bye Zuma. South Africa's controversial president has been pushed out of office by his own party, the ANC. The party of Nelson Mandela has revolted. So we are focusing on three things. Why now? Why did the ANC ditch Jacob Zuma after tolerating years and years of scandals? The Zuma files. He says he's done nothing wrong. Others say he sold the country to millionaires. And Rainbow Nation or Broken Nation? Whatever happened to Nelson Mandela's vision for South Africa? All that and more ahead here in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus we're taking a look at the extraordinary life and times of the original Jay-Z, Jacob Zuma. We have another great panel for you, including the political analyst, Oliver Dickson. Now, he thinks Zuma is a political genius. We'll get him to explain that a little later. We also have Feziwe and Ndwayana. Now, she left the ANC for a new party. And last but not least, we have Jonathan Shapiro, the political cartoonist who's been sued by Zuma not once, but twice. So now we're all gathered. Let's watch our first report, a scene setter, looking at the man himself, his scandals, and why his party is ditching him now.
Jacob Zuma. What a character. The fourth president of South Africa since the end of white rule. 75 years old, a polygamist who's been married 6 times and has at least 20 children. They call him the laughing president. But he's not laughing anymore. His past finally caught up with him this week, and he is on the way out.
No life should be lost in my name. And also, the ANC should never be divided in my name. I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect.
The only question then, why did it take so long? In his 9 years in office, he survived all sorts of scandals and allegations. He also survived 8 votes of no confidence and an impeachment vote.
The motion of no confidence in the president is accordingly negative.
One survey put his approval rating late last year at just 18%. Makes Trump look popular. How did he hang on so long then? Well, the president is chosen by the lower house of parliament, not by the people directly. And Zuma's party, the African National Congress, or ANC, dominates parliament, winning every election since the end of apartheid. The ANC's dominance comes from being more than just a political party. For 105 years, it's embodied the struggle against white rule. And Zuma is firmly rooted in the ANC, joining as a teenager in 1959. He was convicted of trying to overthrow the apartheid government and spent years in jail alongside Nelson Mandela on Robben Island. And so he earned his party's loyalty the hard way. But as the scandals grew, his standing in the ANC declined. Zuma stood down then as ANC president in December last year, but he backed his ex-wife to replace him. She lost to Cyril Ramaphosa, and after losing control of the ANC, it was only a matter of time before he lost the presidency.
Well, we'll get analysis in a moment, but first let's get a personal reaction. Starting with Jonathan, you have opposed Zuma for years. You've been a real thorn in his side. How do you feel now he's gone?
I'm totally elated. It's an incredible moment for us, despite the fact that we know that there are deep roots of corruption. It's not just Jacob Zuma. I mean, one of the reasons that he hasn't gone until now is because of how deeply he's managed to insert this kind of system of patronage and cronyism.
Okay.
He's not the entire problem, but those roots are there, and
we're going to get into all of that.
Who would go down with him. Yeah.
We're going to get into all of that in a moment, Jonathan, but it's just good to have your initial reaction there. Feziwe, same with you. What's it been like over the last 24, 48 hours for you?
Well, I mean, at first I think everyone was really just hoping that he'd resign because he took so long to finally resign. But at the end of it all, I think the country generally is happy because finally he's gone, and we've united as civil society and different political parties to say that we will not allow corruption, to be institutionalized in our political space. So it's a good time.
All right, just going to bounce over to Oliver Dickson now. Oliver, it kind of falls to you to play defender in a way. Will anyone miss Zuma? He had a few achievements in office, didn't he?
Yeah, no, Jacob Zuma certainly, had a place in the hearts and minds of many South Africans. Many of them had very strong feelings towards him in a positive way. Many had bad feelings towards him in a positive way. At the moment, I don't know who would be happier, a South African citizen without Jacob Zuma or an Arsenal fan without Arsene. So it's quite a time in South Africa right now.
OK, well, what's extraordinary is that Jacob Zuma, right to the end, said he didn't know why his own party was pushing him out at this time. I can see you shaking your head there, Jonathan. Why do you think they move now?
There's two centers of power. That's one of the things that has been a problem with the ANC. They elect leaders, and then they elect the ANC president. And 2 years later, the national president is then deployed, and it's generally it would be the president of the ANC. So you have this overlap period where you have somebody who's the president of the party and somebody who is the president of the ANC, and that's a real problem, especially when it just finally came to a head that the guy who the ANC has been defending and defending and defending with absolute no reason to defend other than to kind of keep their so-called unity together, which is actually a joke because they're not unified at all.
Feziwe.
But it came to a head. They couldn't keep doing it when they've got two centers of power.
I see. Feziwe, why do you think it happened right now, just briefly?
In 2019, or possibly sooner at the end of this year, we're going to national elections. And I think the ANC has realized that with the president, that is Jacob Zuma, and without them making a stand that says that, we're putting South Africans first, I think they realize that they'll probably lose a lot of votes to opposition parties. And that's why they acted now. It doesn't have anything to do with unity. It has nothing to do with the country. It's just another way. It's a transition from one faction to another.
Okay, so
basically they're all the same personalities. They have the same values and the same principles.
Well,
we'll still have.
We're going to come back to that. I mean, I can understand the electoral concerns. Oliver, I mean, it's a bit odd. I mean, in one article, you called him a political genius. I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain that. I'm just wondering why Jacob Zuma clung on and then had this rather ignominious end where he went out with a whimper. Why didn't he see that the writing was on the wall?
Because he genuinely, thought that the ANC is still led by principle to the point where, people would have to tell him what he has done wrong before he decides to leave. And Jacob Zuma daringly sat in front of Cyril Ramaphosa and the rest of the top 6 of the ANC and said, if you guys can tell me what I've done wrong, I'll go. And none of them could tell him what he's done wrong, and none of them could tell us what he's done wrong. I mean, we all know what Jacob Zuma has done wrong, and I don't want to speak about corruption and all of those things, but he's just had poor governance. The inequality gap in South Africa has widened under Jacob Zuma's administration.
Oliver,
sanitation and housing in South Africa has slowed down under Jacob Zuma's administration.
We're going to get into exactly those issues in a moment. I just want to stay with the ANC. Let's take a look at the next man to replace him then, the prominent union leader, Cyril Ramaphosa. Here's a quick look at his CV. Basically, we can see there he was once a union leader before turning his hand to business. He is estimated to be worth around $450 million. That's a lot of money, especially in South Africa. Now, he made that fortune through mining, telecoms investment, used to own the South African McDonald's franchise, and has close connections to Coca-Cola. And of course, he is an ANC veteran, spending time in solitary confinement for his anti-apartheid activities. Mandela even chose him to be chief negotiator in ending apartheid. Let's go to Jonathan Shapiro. Jonathan, you've met Cyril Ramaphosa on a number of occasions. There will be people around the world who don't know South African politics very well, who will say, oh, well, here comes another ANC leader, more of the same.
I wouldn't like to be one of those people who's saying more of the same. I know that's what some of the opposition parties are saying. I met Cyril Ramaphosa 32 years ago when he was head of the National Union of Mine Workers. He was also heading the or high representative of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers. So he's got more than one hat, and he was tremendously impressive, and he was fantastic in the negotiations towards democracy. He was also very powerful in the negotiations towards the new constitution. Those things are amazing about him, and also it shows the level that of ability to deal with people, to deal with complex issues, all of that. But then when he left to become, he kind of left a little bit miffed to become a business person, because he'd kind of been outflanked by Thabo Mbeki, the previous president, and he didn't become president. And then I think the riches got to him. I really do. He's not shown great signs. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but as has already been alluded to, there are tremendous problems within the ANC that he's been part of, who has shielded Jacob, even though he's an opponent of Zuma. He's been part of the ANC shielding him from people saying how corrupt he is and how he should never become president in the first place.
We're going to come back to that in a moment. Just going to change gears for a moment. Jacob Zuma has been involved in plenty of scandals, and he has got into trouble over his mansion. But he's never been convicted of anything as president. However, a quick look at the Zuma files show there's plenty of trouble ahead.
The Jacob Zuma charge sheet and list of allegations goes on forever and requires a lot of ink and a robust printer. Here we go then. Zuma's facing 18 counts of corruption relating to a multi-billion-dollar arms deal made back in the 1990s when he was deputy president. It's alleged that Zuma and/or his family received hundreds of payments from his friend and businessman Shabir Sheikh in exchange for personally helping him win business. Sheikh was jailed years ago for corruption.
I think if there are allegations, I will answer that in court.
Zuma was sacked as deputy president in 2005 and also charged, but they didn't stick because it was argued they were politically motivated. But now they're back. A court ruling they have to be reinstated and looked at again.
We'll see Zuma in court. Yes, you must come here.
In 2005, Zuma was charged with raping a family friend who was HIV positive. He argued it was consensual and was acquitted.
Accused is found not guilty.
But he was slammed by HIV awareness campaigners after he said he showered to avoid catching the disease.
I didn't say, as it has been reported, shower is a cure to AIDS. I didn't.
Then there's Zuma's palatial home. How do you pronounce it?
Nkandla. Nkandla. Nkandla.
Whatever. It has a swimming pool and an amphitheatre. Over $16 million of state funds went into its lavish makeover. He said the money went on security upgrades. He needed a chicken coop because free-range chickens were a security risk apparently, and roaming cows could damage sensitive electronic equipment. A court ruled in 2016 he'd breached his oath of office by using public money, and he was ordered to pay quite a big chunk of it back. And now Jacob Zuma faces yet another scandal. An inquiry due to start in March is looking into his rather friendly relationship with the wealthy Gupta brothers. The questions he'll face: were the pair offered any unlawful tenders? And did the Guptas influence his cabinet appointments?
There is no minister who is here who was ever appointed by the Guptas or by anybody else.
In essence, did Jacob Zuma sell the country in what many people are calling state capture?
Well, state capture, that's the key phrase here. Which of you three, please raise your hand, would like to give us a quick definition of state capture?
I'll go.
Go for it, Jonathan. We'll come back to you, Feziwe.
I think
Okay. State capture is a particularly virulent form of corruption, which the thing that makes it's not unique to South Africa, but it really is, it takes corruption to a level that's hardly ever seen, where not only are you getting kickbacks from corrupt people, and you're as a corrupt politician are doing that, so you have that symbiotic relationship, but you're actually allowing those people, as they said at the end of the clip, state capture is the part that refers to almost selling the role of president to other people who have this interest. So,
OK, I got it. Let's just jump back to Feziwe. Feziwe, you're close to the politicians and the hub of power. How much influence do you think the Guptas had over South African politics.
Some former ministers have come out, like, for example, Mcebisi Jonas came out and said that, you know, the Guptas tried to offer him a position which he rejected. I mean, the evidence is out there. A lot of politicians that wanted to stand against corruption actually came out and spoke out against it. I don't think there's much more that we really need. And the investigations that the former public protector did, Thuli Madonsela, also highlighted the influence that the Guptas had. And what's really sad about it is that it has proven how democracy has just recently become, well, over the years, has become a consensus of the wealthy. The more money you have, the more power you have to influence how our state functions.
Let me ask Oliver, we have some pictures of the raid of the Gupta's compound earlier this week. We're going to play those now. Let me ask you, do you think this was some sort of veiled threat to Zuma?
No. This was entirely unrelated matters. Jacob Zuma's resignation had nothing to do with the raid on the Gupta compound, because we would know from about 2 weeks ago that the Hawks had indicated that they would investigate the Guptas, they would, come down on them, and it was just a matter of time. The fact that both of these events happened yesterday is a very strong coincidence. So I think the investigation that the public protector carried out on the Guptas and the one that the Hawks, which is a special crimes investigation unit in South Africa, the investigation they had out on the Guptas, was just an accumulation of evidence that warranted them enough reason to raid their premises and to take them in for questioning.
Okay,
so very little is related at this moment.
I just want to go back to this concept, state capture. Now, Cyril Ramaphosa has said it has cost the economy dearly, and he's presumably offering a way out of this. But there is a young politician in South Africa, well known, Julius Malema, and he is very skeptical about Cyril Ramaphosa.
Zuma to go because it's the time for Cyril's group to eat. And they call it a transition. Transition from what?
Well, let's go back to Jonathan. Jonathan, we know that Ramaphosa is very wealthy himself, but do you think he has what it takes to save the South African economy? And is he even interested in solving the issues of inequality?
I think he's a Democrat at heart. I think he would like to do that. I really think he would dearly like to do that. My problem with him is how he has shielded Zuma. He's been part of the ANC's shielding of Zuma, and so that, there are serious issues with how much he can do. But I believe that even though he's a wealthy person, that's what he's going to try and do. And I think he has a chance now, and I want to give him that opportunity.
Well, Jonathan is a celebrated cartoonist and is also known as Shapiro. We're going to take a look at some of his work now. This is what got him in trouble initially with Jacob Zuma. Jonathan, just so you know, we're looking at the cartoon where Zuma is crossing his fingers. Why did he want to sue you for that?
Look, that is one of 3 cartoons that he sued me for. It's the least explosive. The others are much, much harsher. But in 2006, at the end of his rape trial, he was acquitted, but he didn't like a lot of the real harsh criticism I'd given him, including the first cartoon where I drew a shower. That's the one, and that's a much tougher cartoon. And he really hated that one. And it's got the first shower that I ever drew. It says for AIDS prevention. I never had to do that again. It became a fixture.
So Jonathan, thank you for that. We're going to move on. What would South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela, make of all this? Things were supposed to get better after apartheid, but have they?
Never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
The promise of a new beginning, but more than 20 years on, Mandela's vision for South Africa appears to have been derailed. In fact, South Africa is known as the most unequal society in the world. For example, there is still a big gap between whites and blacks. Whites make up just 9% of the population, but own most of the land. On average, white people earn 5 times more than black people, and they control the vast majority of private businesses. But there is also a black elite, which has a similar monopoly over state-run companies. And some have become very wealthy in certain sectors, including mining, banking, and telecoms. But those examples are few and far between. 40% of black workers can't find a job, compared to just 6.6% of whites. And with a tiny minority living it up, while more than half of South Africans live in poverty, South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. 50 people a day are murdered, fewer than in Mandela's era perhaps, but still one of the highest homicide rates in the world. The police are stretched, so those who can afford it are hiring private security guards, who now outnumber regular police by more than 2 to 1. A sorry state of affairs, but can the next leader get the country back on track?
Feziwe, I just want to come to you. Are things better for black South Africans financially now compared to, say, towards the end of apartheid?
Look, what has happened is that there are more black people that are in the middle class. There are more black people that are wealthy in South Africa. But what has happened is that with the increase of black people into the middle class, there's also been a huge gap between the rich and the poor within the black communities themselves. So it isn't to say that there hasn't been an improvement, but the problem is that there's been a gap that has been created since 1994.
Okay, now Oliver, just back to you for a moment, very quickly on the inequality question. What is the main reason for this ongoing massive gap between black and white in terms of income?
Oh no, that's because at the end of apartheid what you saw was a transfer of political power, but there was no transfer of economic power. I think in large part, if you look at any top 5 companies in any industry in South Africa, almost completely white owned. And those companies find a very strong root in the apartheid government. If you look at Naspers, for instance, if you look at Old Mutual, for instance, these are very wealthy companies, that find its roots in apartheid. So you didn't see that transfer of power. What you did see, however, is these companies placing ANC members who are senior ANC members on their board of directors, making them non-voting directors, to pacify them, to silence them, for the real change to actually happen. So the land question is still a question that aches the hearts of many South Africans today, and the fact that while there are more black people in the middle class, there are a significant amount of more black people who just aren't able to access the economy at all, who live on less than $1 a day and live far below the poverty line.
Okay, Feziwe, I just got a question. I mean, we've dealt with the economy. What about how Parliament is working? We've got some pictures here, that went round the world and really shocked people. We have the economic freedom fighters being pushed out of Parliament by the parliamentary security detail. I mean, does Parliament work in South Africa, or is it dysfunctional?
In essence, what they wanted to do was to symbolize how people on the ground felt. So when they went into Parliament, they came in with a different character, a more radical character that says that we are going to go in and we'll truly try and represent people that are on the ground. Do I approve of it myself? I don't think it was correct. I think in some ways they've changed how South Africans look at Parliament. Of course, there's been more interest in Parliament now among South Africans, but now the respect of Parliament and the space itself, I think that has been polarized.
Well, we're going to stay in Parliament. And of course, Jacob Zuma, known as the laughing president, often really annoyed his opponents. Take a look at this.
The president answers a question, says absolutely nothing, and then he laughs.
Medical experts say that if you want to live a long and healthy life, then you laugh every day. So I think that's why you're laughing.
My laughing is not hurtful, it's healthy. Thank you very much for that.
You laughed. You laughed while the people of South Africa cried for their beloved country. You laughed while trampling Madiba's legacy.
Why did he laugh so much? Please, anyone who thinks they can answer that.
So I just think it's a weird idiosyncrasy. I don't think his laughing was necessarily him not taking South Africans serious. Let's call it old age for now. I do think his actions in many instances was an indication that he didn't take the country serious. Not his actual laughing. I think the fact that unemployment amongst young people grew above 60%, if you use the unofficial definition, is him really laughing at the country, not him cracking his ribs in Parliament.
Jonathan, go for it, Jonathan. Why was he laughing so much?
In 2007, we were doing a spitting image type puppet series, Zanews. It's been running for a long time. I was early on in identifying the laugh and the throat clearing as two things that he did when he was uncomfortable and he couldn't actually answer the question. And so it is an idiosyncrasy, but it really is all about cover up. And he's a really smooth operator. I've confronted him twice in person, once on the radio, once actually in person. And boy, oh boy, this guy's a smooth operator and he covers up a hell of a lot with that laugh.
Well, that's all we have time for. Just to thank our guests now, Jonathan Shapiro, Feziwe Ndwayana, and Oliver Dickson. Thank you all very much for joining us in the Nexus. That's it for now. Next week, we're looking at the billionaires fiddling with our democracies. See you then. Thanks for watching.